Welcome back to the Ripe Wave audio community. My name is John, and for this video, we are going to continue our home theater amplifier series for those models available in 2022, and this time it is for Anthem amplifiers. And this whole series began with Monolith by Monoprice, Emotiva, Tone Winner, Iota VX, Outlaw Audio, ATI Amplifier Technologies, OSD, NAD, Marantz, Yamaha, Onkyo Integra, Rotel, Arcam JBL Synthesis, AudioControl, and this one, the 15th in the series, Anthem. And in this video, we are going to be covering their MCA series, second generation, for 2, 3, and 5 channel models, the M1 Monoblock, the STR amplifier, and the P2 and P5 amplifiers to round it off. And these range from $2,300 all the way up to $9,000. So there is quite a range in prices here. And this series is for enthusiasts who are willing to spend a little more for their amplifiers. We're first going to take a look at the MCA series, which is really intended for home theater applications. And the first one here is going to be their 2-channel model. This is the MCA 225 Gen 2 and sells for $2,300. Now this was introduced to the market in 2021 and puts out 225 watts per channel as a Class AB amplifier. Now this new series adopts the latest design language with a very minimalist view on the front panel here. You've got that glossy look on the left with a more matte look on the right, but it's all all black and simply just a power button on the right hand side with Anthem red LED behind that. When we look around the back, you see both balanced and unbalanced connections. They do give you a ability to change how that trigger is going to work to turn this on. Is it going to be manual? Is it going to be through the cable? Yeah, they give you those capabilities there. Now the series continues with their 3-channel model, the MCA 325 Gen 2, and this sells for $400 more at $2,700. Now also introduced in 2021, this unit is delivering the same power per channel, but doing it for 3 channels. So you get that same 225 watts of Class AB power. And otherwise, this is an identical unit with just that additional channel put on to the back to give you the 3 channels. Now the last in the MCA series, the MCA 525 Gen 2, sells for $1,100 more than the 3-channel models, bringing it to $3,800. Now, like the 3-channel models, this is still delivering 225 watts per channel, but this time for 5 channels of Class AB amplification. And like the 2 and the 3-channel models, this is pretty much identical on the front and back of the unit. Now Anthem does provide an interior shot for the 5-channel model, and we can only assume that the 2 and the 3-channel models are depopulated versions of the 5. The question that comes to my mind is, at which point do they remove the second toroidal power supply? But in case of the 5-channel, definitely 2 toroidal power supplies to handle the additional channels. Moving on to the M1 Monoblock. Now this unit was introduced in 2011, so a little bit older, at least 10 years older than the MCA series. And this is their only Class D entry to their portfolio. And selling at $4,000, this is just a single channel. Now, like the prior series, you do get to select the types of triggers that you want to have, and it is an in and out trigger as well, with both balanced and imbalanced connections for the source coming into this. And the M1 is a very slim model. If you wanted to stack these up in your rack, this would take up very little room inside there. And the interior shot shows the layout of the M1 monoblock. So obviously in a chassis of this type, you don't see the same toroidal power supply as you do in the other models, and this we assume is a switch mode power supply. The STR amplifier is generally positioned within the Anthem portfolio as a two-channel, stereo amplifier for those who, really not for home theater applications, but for two-channel listening. This sells for $6,500 and delivers 400 watts into those two channels of Class AB amplification. Now this does give you both balanced and unbalanced connections like the other models. Now the design language is very similar to that of the MCA amplifiers, but you do get the addition of having these LED generated analog style gauges to show the power output for the left and the right channels, which we kind of like. And on the back, you get the same type of configuration where you can determine your trigger type and input signal as either balanced or unbalanced. The STR uniquely is also available in a silver finish. Now, for two-channel listening, the need for having darker components so it doesn't reflect the light is not as important. So I guess this is why they decided to make it available in silver. Now, typically I do prefer silver in a lot of cases, but for this design language, maybe the black works the best, but of course everybody has their preference. The interior of the STR is very similar to the MCA line. So if you compare this to the 5-channel 525 MCA, you see the toroidal power supplies being two of them, positioned just about in the same place. You see the capacitor bank just to the left of them. You do only see 4 sets of heat sinks and amplifiers, whereas the 525 has 5. So what I suspect is happening here, you're having 2 pairs of amplifier modules for each channel. You have a pair of amplifier modules and heat sinks for each channel, so this will give you a good performance output. Now the STR was introduced in 2017. Moving on to the P series, we see the first model here is the P2, which is a 2-channel model and is available for $5,000. Introduced in 2009, the P series is the oldest series in this lineup. Now this is delivering 325 watts per channel as Class AB amplification. Now even in 2009 we had very similar characteristics in the back here with the input-output triggers and the ability to change how those triggers are going to behave. Is it going to use those or be manual or automatically sensing there? So that is the same. We got these nice big handles in the back to be able to support the load as you put this into an equipment rack. A couple of LEDs on the front, but the design language is entirely different on the P series. And I would think at this price point, they would at least gone through the effort to update the cosmetics to match the modern Anthem line. So if you were going to put together a brand new system today from Anthem and you bought their processor or receiver or going to put an amplifier with that design language should match. So a little disappointed that they don't make available an updated version to at least cosmetically match the other Anthem components. This is using an older design standard here. Now, if we look inside of the P2, we can see here that it is using toroidal power supply, 1 for each amplifier channel, and these are laid out kind of like cards, as we've seen in other Anthem models. And there's a lot of open space inside the P2 which suggests that the P5 is just a more populated version of the P2, and which it is. So we can see here on the P5, this $9,000 unit, you've got 5 LED lights on the front to indicate the status of each channel, the power button, and the power status. This was also introduced in 2009, has the ability to use either balanced or unbalanced connections, the same Anthem standard for triggers of being able to select it manually or automatic or with the trigger wire. But this is delivering also 325 watts per channel, but this time to 5 channels at class AB. Now the inside of the P5 is just as we expected. Those other slots are populated with 3 more channels in the P5, each with their own toroidal power supply, which is very nice. Looking at the Anthem lineup altogether, we can see that the MCA and the STR model all follow the same design language, and they have been the more recent introduction to the portfolio. And the M1 and the P5 series, which is harkening back to a style that Anthem had over 10 years ago. And as we said, it would have been nice if they did a refresh, particularly because these units sell for over $4,000, and in the case of the P5, $9,000. So, at least modernize the look and feel of these premium units that are in their lineup. And of course, if we turn around the back here, we can see again the similarities in the generations of product here. So the MCA and the STR have a very similar layout versus the P2, definitely from the same vintage there. For the interior shots that we do have, we can see them inside here. Of course, the STR and the MCA have that modular approach, and we do see a modular approach in the P2 and the P5, although those modules are handled different. Instead of having a toroidal power supply on each of the module, those are larger toroids at the front of the unit versus one on each of the cards. Now on to the specifications. Now we can see here that the impedance of the new generation MCA products are 10 kiloohms for unbalanced and 15 kiloohms for balanced connections. The M1 monoblock is 10 kiloohms for unbalanced and 20 kiloohms for balance. Now the STR follows the same as the MCA with 10 kiloohms for unbalanced, 15 kiloohms for balanced. Now the P2 series are at 18 kiloohms for unbalanced and 22 kiloohms for balance. Now these all have input and output triggers with those switches, so you can just determine if you want manual, automatic, or trigger-based power on, power off of these units. The input sensitivity at 8 ohms is 1.5 volts for the MCA series and 2.1 for the STR. The M1 monoblock is at 3.2 volts and the P series is a 1 volt sensitivity. Now the cost per channel here, the most affordable unit per channel is the MCA 525 Gen 2, which comes in at $760. The most expensive unit is the M1 monoblock at $4,000 per channel. Now, while the P5 comes in at $9,000 for the total, it is $1,500 per channel, so somewhere in between in their ranges. All of the Anthem amplifiers give a gain of 29 decibels. Now we can see here that Anthem does permit 2 ohm loads, which is lower than a lot of the amplifiers out there, but we get the notation in the manual that for the MCA series as well as the STR, that the 2 ohm capability is for short burst only. So I think I would still feel better than only driving 4 ohm speakers, but you might have a 4 ohm, a speaker that's rated for 4 ohm that will dip down to 2 ohms at times. then I think this is a good pairing. But if you have a 2 ohm rated speaker, I would probably want to get a amplifier that is definitely designed for 2 ohm, like the M1 or the P series that are in this lineup. Now all of these have a maximum load impedance of 8 ohms. They don't have any pass-through line output. Looking at the output specifications, we see that consistency in the ranges. So the MCA series is going to give you 225 watts per channel into 8 ohms, 400 watts into 4 ohms, and 600 watts into 2 ohms for those short bursts. The STR series gives you a little more power. It gives you 400 watts into 8 ohms, 600 watts into 4, and 800 watts for those 2 ohm loads for short bursts. The M1 series is giving you 1,000 watts into 8 ohms and 2,000 watts into 4 ohms. They do not give a 2 ohm rating. And the P2 series comes in at 325 watts, 8 ohms, and 500 watts into 4 ohms, and 675 watts into 2 ohms. What I like about Anthem is they're always doing their measurements for these specifications over a full spectrum, 20 to 20,000 hertz. They do on the MCA series only do it for 1% total harmonic distortion versus the other models do it at 0.1%. So that's better on those more premium models. They're giving you a tighter specification. Now the MCA has a good signal to noise ratio of 120 decibels. The M1 has the lowest signal to noise at 113 decibels, and the STR is 121, very close to the MCA, and the P2 series is 125 decibels. Now, as far as the dimensions, the MCA series is very consistent. The height is 6.6 inches, 196 millimeters, 17.3 inches wide, 438 millimeters, 18.1 inches deep, 460 millimeters. So that's across the MCA series. The slim M1 comes in at 2.3 inches, 57 millimeters high. It is a little wider at 19.3 inches, 490 millimeters, and has a depth of 18.8 inches, 476 millimeters. The STR is 6.6 inches, so a little taller than the MCA, 172 millimeters, 17 inches wide, 432 millimeters, 18.5 inches deep, 470 millimeters, and the P2 series are the largest at 9.4 inches tall, 238 millimeters, 19.2 inches wide, 490 millimeters, and have a depth of 22.5 inches, 572 millimeters. So those are the largest. As far as the weight, the M1 monoblock is the lightest. Now that's Class D amplification with a switch mode power supply. So naturally, that's the lightest at 20 pounds, 9 kilograms. The next one up from that appears to be the MCA 225 2-channel model, 40 pounds, 18 kilograms. Then it goes up to the 3-channel MCA, 43 pounds, 19.5 kilograms. The MCA 525 Gen 2 is close to the weight of the STR, around 60 pounds, 27.5 kilograms thereabouts. The P series are the heaviest. The P2 is 75 pounds, 34 kilograms, and the P5 is a monster at 130 pounds, 59 kilograms. They all have IEC power cords. They all let you choose between 120 and 240 volts, but you have to do so with the factory because this is not field selectable. They all have toroidal except for the M1 toroidal power supplies. The MCA 525 we did find out was 2 toroids. The other ones, the 3 and the 2-channel ones, only a single power supply. And the STR and the P2 all have 2 power supplies, whereas the P5 has 5 toroidal power supplies within them. So you go from 300 watts consumption on the M1 to up to 3600 on the P5 watts, 3600 watts consumption, and everything in between there. Standby power is somewhere between 1 and 2 watts depending on the model. The P series, we do not know what the standby power, it's not listed. We do get slew rate ratings on these models, which you don't always get. 30 volts per microsecond on the MCA as well as the STR, and 40 volts per microsecond on the P series. Crosstalk is 65 decibels for the MCA series and 101 decibels for the STR and P series. There is no crosstalk rating on the M1. Damping factor is 300 microfarads for the MCA, 360 microfarads for the STR, and 600 microfarads for the P series. The M1 gives a range of damping from 800 to 1400 microfarad. We can't see any use of fans on these models. So that wraps it up for Anthem. What do you think of the Anthem lineup? The MCA is clearly targeted at home theater applications. Do you see the use of the M1 or the P series or the STR series for home theater applications? That feedback would be useful to the RipeWave audio community. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to this RipeWave audio community. And also, I do want to point out, if you want to have access to our full database, including these 15 brands that we've covered, numerous models within each brand in this database, you can become a Patreon by visiting www.patreon.com/RipeWave, and that little extra commitment to supporting us would be very appreciated. So please consider that. And as always, be sure to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when the next video is posted. Until the next video, keep evolving your audio experience.